HB. It is so good to be with you. I have to admit, every time I'm here with you guys, I get jealous because, man, I want to be a part of something like this that's so fun and exciting. And I got to come out one day for Ballapalooza and see that and see all the different things that are going on and listen to everyone. It's so fun to see what's happening. And this word about the library, I hope you'll come tonight and just continue to dream and pray about what God has next. But we want to think a little bit about what God has next in our own lives, and that requires changing the rhythm of our lives, because sometimes we let our lives get a little out of control. When I was in high school, my very first car was a 1981 Volkswagen Rabbit diesel. Total muscle car, okay? Total chick magnet car. I mean, that car, so to get to school, what I would do is I'd push it out of my driveway, down the street, and then I would roll it down a hill. Now, I was in it, but I'd roll it down the hill, pop the clutch, and then, off to school. Now, I think some of you know how to do that, but a lot of you, I can tell, are young, and you don't know how, you never had a chance to pop the clutch to get your car to work. So, and then I'd park on a hill at school, and that's how I would do things. Well, I didn't know really anything about cars, and I certainly didn't know anything about the maintenance of cars, and I didn't do anything to maintain my car because my belief was I couldn't afford to maintain my car. And so for about 2 years owning the car, I never did anything to it. And so one night that all caught up to me. The way it happened is I was coming home from Tustin. About 11 o'clock at night, I got from the 55 freeway onto the 405 freeway. And my car always shook a little bit, and it could only peak at about 65 miles an hour. And it starts shaking, but now it's like, and finally, boom! Nothing. Coasting. I had to coast over to the shoulder and then get out of the car, walk off the freeway, go find a payphone. Now, what a payphone is, Owen, is there were phones. You put a quarter in it and you call. So I had to find a payphone, call my family to come pick me up because I'm stranded here. So the next day, my uncle comes and he lifts the hood. He pulls out the dipstick, checks the oil. He goes, "Bill, there is not a drop of oil in this car. You have completely fried the engine of this car. It is toast. It is gone." And so what I learned in that moment was, my thinking was, I could not afford to do the maintenance on that car. What I learned from that experience was I could afford not to do maintenance on that car. And that's how some of our lives are, right? Our lives are in that kind of state, shaking, kind of rumbling, kind of at that place. And if you don't figure out something, boom, your life is about to explode. So let me ask you this question. How many of you are tired today? How many of you are tired, okay? Right? I won't ask how many of you are exhausted because we can tell by just looking at your faces who you are. But here's the thing. I would guess is some of you're tired because it was a hard day or hard night. Some of you are tired because it's been a hard season. You're just trying to catch your breath from the season that you're in. Some of you, summer's great. It's a chance to catch your breath. And some of you just feel like, I'm just so ready for summer to be over. Can we just start a new rhythm of what's next? I love this quote from a writer. Her name is Bridget Scholten. She wrote a book called Overwhelmed. And she says this. She says, before I began working on this book, she says, I thought that's just how life had to be. Fast, crazy, busy, breathless. And then she said, particularly if you are a 21st century working mom. So working moms, can I get an amen from that, okay? Look, if you live in Orange County like we do, my guess is you have to work and drive and go and just go just to survive, not to get ahead even in Orange County, just to survive as a family in Orange County. We know that this is the way it is. And here's the problem, and you heard, I appreciate, Mitchell, your willingness. We struggle with the ability to slow down. It's not just that we can't slow down, we won't slow down. And it creates kind of this agitated state for us. Here's just a litmus test for you. How many of you are going to be frustrated today after service at lunchtime because you can't get Chick-fil-A, right? You're going to be like, you know what? today was going to be a great day if I could just have some delicious chicken strips. Why do they get to take a day off? Today is my day off, and I want some delicious chicken strips, and you really... okay, I'm wound a little tight right now, aren't I? We feel it. John Ortberg writes this. He says, many people in our day and many people in this room have entered into a way of life that is toxic to your soul, that has the potential to destroy your spirit and sap the life out of you. If your whole life is just a rushed, unblinking movement from task to task, if you find yourself constantly running on fumes, trying to cram more into your days, if there's nothing more to your life than just increasing its speed, you're going to pay a real serious price. We know that we need to slow down for our health. We know that we need to slow down simply for the effectiveness of what it is that we do. But here, let me give you a big idea today that I think is really important of why we need to slow down. We need to slow down enough to be trained by Jesus. We need to slow down enough to be trained by Jesus. We need to figure out somehow how to build into the rhythm of our life, how to create space, slow down enough that Jesus can train us to build his life. This is our theme. Our theme is under construction. We're talking about the unique way in which God is trying to build his life in ours. And so what we've seen is to do that, we have to be prepared for him to tear some things down and in its place, build something new. Build something better. Build something life-giving. And we've seen all kinds of different things, how to build better relationships, how to build prayerfulness, how to build character. And today I want to talk about building a better rhythm, because as we think about this, if all you do is build, in some ways you're going to find that it just kind of adds to all the tension and frustration it is. But is there a way in which we just need to think about this building rhythm? Is there a way that we can learn something from this? And I think that we're going to see something very interesting, just a fascinating moment in Jesus' life, and I want to illustrate it through a commandment that God gives us. So can I invite you to turn to Mark chapter 6. Mark chapter 6, and you have Bibles there in front of you. Mark chapter 6, we're going to read verses 30 to 32. 30 to 32. It's on page 703. And as you're turning there, let me just set it up a little bit. So Mark chapter 6 is it's a fascinating passage in that Jesus has been going village to village. He's just come out of his own hometown and been rejected, but now there's been some powerful things going on in Jesus' life and ministry, and now he takes his 12, he divides them in twos, and he's going to send out 6 teams. And as he prepares to send them out, he gives them authority. He tells them to share, to preach, call people to repentance, tell them to turn back to God. You guys, the things you saw me do, I'm going to give you the power and ability to do those things as well. Spirits will submit to you. You will be able to do the kind of miracles you saw. And so he sends them out. They go, and there's this powerful work that happens. So powerful, in fact, that the king at the time, King Herod, he's hearing stories about Jesus. He's hearing stories about these disciples. In fact, we see in chapter 6 that he's even wondering, he had killed John the Baptist. He's wondering, has John the Baptist come back to life? Because something supernatural is happening. So even the king's palace is buzzing about what is happening. And notice what happens in verse 30, what we see happening there. It says this, it says that the apostles, so they come back from their time. It says this, that the apostles gathered around Jesus and reported to him all they had done and taught. Then, because so many people were coming and going that they did not even have a chance to eat, he said to them, "Come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest." So they went away by themselves in a boat to a solitary place. Now let's stop there for a moment and let's take a moment just to think about what's happened. The 12 return. They begin to share these stories, and the stories, their ministry is powerful. People are responding. People are hearing these things. They're in awe of everything that's happening, and we know it's powerful because what do we see? The people have followed them from the villages back to this place, so much so, and they're pressing. They want more teaching, more power, more miracles, more deliverance, more. There's so much going on that they don't even have time to stop and eat. Now, I want you to take a moment and stop there for a second. And I want you to think about whatever it is that you do. What would you do if it became so successful that the crowds pressed in for more? And I don't know what it is, but your boss saw you doing such a great job that it was, I'm going to promote you to this next level. Now it's going to require more travel and more opportunity, but this is your chance to climb the ladder. You have a chance to do more. Your clients are coming. They want more. Whatever it was, if you were you had the opportunity to just take in more opportunity, more success, more everything, how would you respond to that? I know for me, I think, okay, my industry, more people want to come to the church. I would say, okay, we start more services. We have 4 services already. Let's start another one at Huntington. Let's start another one at Fountain Valley. Let's start a Saturday night. Let's start a Sunday night. Hey, Thursday nights, what if we just let the crowds watch you rehearse and we'll just build the plane while we fly it? More. That would be my mentality. Let's just keep building more, right? That's kind of how we do it. You got to seize the moment. Well, here's a moment for Jesus. Tremendous success, tremendous popularity. Everybody wants more. And what does Jesus do? Take a look. It will make you so uncomfortable. He says, let's stop and let's get out of here. He sees everything that's going on. Here's the first thing I want you to see as we talk about this new rhythm. Number 1 is this: Jesus is compassionate with our fatigue. He's compassionate with our fatigue. In the midst of the popularity, the success, Jesus stopped. He stopped. Now, I don't know what it was like to get in that boat, because I imagine there was 2 kind of responses. I imagine that there were some of the disciples who thought, oh, thank you. This feels so good. I'm so hungry. I'm starving, right? And others who were thinking, Jesus, what are you doing? This was our moment. It was working. We were taking like everything we dreamed, everything you talked about. It was happening. Why are you doing this? And so I can imagine there had to be this idea. But notice for Jesus, in the midst of this, he is concerned. He is compassionate with our fatigue. Now, you and I don't do well with fatigue, do we? We're not very good at it. And what we know is that we keep pushing. And what it does, in essence, is it kind of just builds kind of a stressfulness in our life. The word stress just is derived from this word. It means to tighten. I mean, isn't that how you feel when you feel stressed? You feel like almost like your body, your soul, like everything about you is just kind of tightened up. And we know that most health-related stuff that we deal with, somehow we can dig down and find that stress is one of the main causes of the health issues that we have. And so we know that we don't do very well. We don't have a very good rhythm, and our rhythm is not God's. In the midst of all these things, I heard this saying, I thought it was very interesting. What do you call a billionaire who has blown through 3 marriages and alienated all his kids? A success. Right? Isn't that how our culture thinks about success? Like, well, that's just the price of success. Jesus has a different rhythm, doesn't he? Jesus has a different rhythm to him. And he, in this moment of great success, he pulls him away. There's a different pattern. It's interesting. In fact, Luke chapter 5, verse 16 tells us this about Jesus, that he would do this often. That often he'd pull away from the crowds and he'd find a solitary place to pray. In fact, if you get to the end of chapter 6, you'll see that he actually does this again, that he pulls himself away, he sends them away, and he goes to a solitary place to pray. But Luke says often, meaning the idea is that there was a pattern for Jesus, that this wasn't something he just did when there was something into the rhythm and routine of Jesus' life that he saw as value of building his life, building his ministry, was to pull away and to be with the Father. And Jesus was very intentional about setting aside this time. And it's interesting, a never-ending list of perpetual good, a never-ending list of need, And Jesus knew how important it was. Because what do we know is going to happen? Why does Jesus do this? If you look at verse 33, you'll see why Jesus does this. As they go around to verse 33, notice what it says. Many who saw them leaving recognized them and ran on foot from all the towns and got there ahead of them. So he gets into the boat, they get in and they're going across, and what do the people see? They just run. They just start walking, and they're there waiting. It's a tremendous picture of our lives, right? Because here's what you need to know. On the other side of the lake, the crowds will be waiting for you. All right? So if you're in business, at the end of meetings and reports and sales calls and whatever else is what? More meetings, more reports, more sales calls. If you're a teacher, classes, lesson plans, grading, you get a break from that. What's waiting for you on the other end of that? More lesson plans, more classes, more grading, right? If you're a student, right, how does it feel? You've got school, you've got homework, you've got tests. What's waiting when you're all done with your studying for your tests? More homework, more tests, right? It's always going to be there waiting for you, right? And so Jesus says, what does he say? He knows it's all going to be there. So he makes a decision, and the decision is he intentionally pulls away, and he's showing the disciples this. He models it for them, but he shows them, look, stop. Let's get away. Why? They're going to still be there. And we're going to have opportunity to minister to them. But right now, you need to catch your breath. Right now, you need something to eat. Right now, we just need to tell stories and laugh and be together. And we see this very, very different rhythm. God wants a rhythm to our lives. Work and rest. Activity and reflection. Production, thanksgiving. Why? Because we know that life gets chaotic, that life is going to get frenzied, that if we don't stop and kind of remember in some ways that we're going to be overwhelmed by these things. But again, I want you to see that this invitation to rest, it's built into this compassionate part of who God is for his people. So here's the thing as you kind of see this. As you begin to think about this, God wants to build this kind of rhythm in our lives, and I want us to think a little bit about this. As we kind of get into this, here's what I want us to think about. I want to give you like a word picture or a moment in the Bible to kind of help categorize this, and it comes from the very beginning of creation. And in the beginning of creation, here's what we see is that there's this way in which we are to think differently about rhythm to our lives. And so here's what we see, this idea. Twice the law is given. Let me just read it from Genesis first. So here's what we read from Genesis. We read these things. It says this. Genesis chapter 2, verses 1 to 3. Here's the rhythm that we see God build into this, even the creative work of his own. He says, thus the heavens and the earth were completed in all their vast array. By the seventh day, God had finished the work he'd been doing. So on the seventh day, he rested from all his work. And then God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it he rested from all the work of creating that he had done. I want you to think about this picture, and I want to give you one thing that will kind of help us think about this rhythm, and it's the idea of Sabbath, or we might call it taking a day off, but I want to explain it just a little bit. But there's a picture in the Bible that we as God's people are to have this rhythm to our life where we do these things, but we stop and we rest, and we see it here in Genesis 2 that God gets done with his work. And what you have to understand about when God got to the end of his work, he wasn't like an NBA player at the end of the fourth quarter at the free throw line, like grabbing his shorts, trying to grab some breath, like, man, creating a world. Oh man, that's a lot of work. Like he didn't need it. But I want you to watch, there's something to this rhythm that I think is really powerful. Two ways to look at this. The first thing is this: we see that we stop and we rest. We stop and we rest. So Sabbath means to stop. It means to cease. It means to rest. So why is it that Jesus had this kind of rhythm built into him? Because God wanted this kind of rhythm into the life of his people. And so the very word Sabbath means to stop. It means to cease. It means to rest. And so as we look at this, think about this. There's there's a commandment given to us to rest, to recognize the Sabbath, to have this time where we have this we keep it holy, we set it apart. So we see it at the beginning of when God's people are rescued out of slavery and Exodus, and then again in Deuteronomy. Now here's the thing that's so interesting as we think about this, is I want you to think about this. Here's a commandment that's given to us, and think of all the commandments. Rarely do you hear anyone brag about breaking commandments like murder, adultery, stealing, things like that. But we brag about this all the time, don't we? Like, I haven't taken a day off in 2 weeks. I work like 14 hours. Like, we have no problem breaking this commandment and actually bragging about it to each other, because it's kind of a badge of honor in our culture that we're hardworking people. That's how you do it. But I want you to see something. Listen to, in Deuteronomy, when he gives the commandment, listen again to the compassion of God in it. So think about this. He says this. So there's a theme in Deuteronomy, and part of the theme in Deuteronomy is to remember. They're about to go in and inherit the land. And so in Deuteronomy, he's reminding them of everything they've set up. He says, observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy, as the Lord your God has commanded you. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day it is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you, nor your son or daughter, nor your male or female servant, nor your ox, your donkey, or any other animals, nor any foreigner residing in your town, so that that your male and female servants may rest as you do. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and that the Lord your God brought you out of there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God has commanded you to observe the Sabbath day. Now, this idea that he's commanded you to do something feels oppressive, but remember the word he says, remember you were slaves. When they were slaves, what did that mean? The work never stopped. It was ceaseless. It just never ended. And someone was always oppressing them. In fact, even remember when they asked to leave, the Pharaoh got even more oppressive. They didn't know the idea of rest. They didn't. Their recent history had no idea of resting. They could have never gone to the slave masters and said, this day is a holy day. We're supposed to rest. It'd be like twice the bricks today. Okay, so that everything they have known has been oppressive to this moment. And so God is building it. He's saying, look, you haven't known this rest, but I'm bringing you into a land of rest and a land of blessing. So one of the things I want you to do is to have a day where you stop and you rest. And in this, one of the things that you see, there's this rhythm for us, and we see that we're supposed to stop. You no longer work for Pharaoh. You no longer have to build someone else's empire. Now, I don't know about you, but I've been trying to think through this and say, whose empire do I struggle with? Like, who is it that I cannot stop working for? Or what is it that I cannot stop working for? And one of the things I realized for me was fear. Fear and reputation would not allow me to stop. It was the thing that kind of pushed me to ceaseless work. And so one of the things that when you, in writing and preaching and things like that, is on Tuesday, everything sounds brilliant. Everything you write sounds like it's the smartest thing. People are just going to go crazy for it. And on Friday, it sounds like the dumbest thing. It's like if I say this out loud, Christianity will be ruined for all the world. And so every Friday, what would happen for me is I'd have this panic attack. I literally would have this moment where I'd be like, why did you pick me for this? Why? I cannot do this. It's too hard. I'm going to sound stupid. I'm not smart enough to do this. I was a youth pastor. Let me throw marshmallows at kids, like something better. And so I'd have this panic attack. And so what I had to learn to do was this. I had to learn that for me, the empire was me. It was building the kingdom of Bill, the empire of Bill. And that's what I was stressed about. I was worried about. And so I made Friday a part of Friday was a Sabbath. I would not work on the I do not work on the sermon at all on Friday. No matter how bad it looks on Thursday night, I'm not allowed to touch it on Friday. It's a day of rest. Because the belief is this, it's an equation, it's a math equation, that 6 days plus God is greater than 7 days of Bill. Okay, it's the same reason why I tithe and I give money away, because I believe that 90% plus God is worth far more than 100% of what is mine, and I trust that. And so there's a way in which I had to think that, what is it for you that won't let you rest? So maybe it is a Pharaoh, or maybe you're the Pharaoh, or maybe there's something in you that just cannot let go and cannot stop or cease, that can't be quiet, as Mitchell was saying. Like, even in those moments, you cannot let silence enter in because it feels awkward, right? Our two boys are totally different. Andrew, we punished him by sending him in his room for timeout. He loved it because he's an introvert. Like, this is awesome. I love you. Trevor, on the other hand, boy, timeout with no people and no interaction. It was like, prison. Like, he's banging. There's scratch marks on the wall. Like, some of you know your personality. Man, I don't have the personality to stop. I don't have the personality to be quiet. But see, I want you to see the gift that is given here. And here's one of the things I think Jesus says. Jesus knew that we constantly worry and we stress and we get super upset. And so he said this. He said, look, you worry about a lot of things. So here's what I want you to do. Notice the way he changes almost the language. Instead of focusing on empires, he says this: seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. Meaning all the things you worry about. And notice what he says: don't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. And so if we're gonna practice this new rhythm, we have to stop building empires, whoever it is that's oppressing us. We have to receive from God this gift and this model to stop, cease, rest. But what do you do with that? Does that mean like invitation to binge on Netflix? Like, oh, this is so great. God's so cool. Like, because I really want to watch Stranger Things too, like for the next 8 hours, like whatever it is. Here's the thing I want you to see, that we need to worship and delight. We need to worship and delight. Jesus, again, I think we see a pattern that the way that he enjoyed this time of rest, whether it was just throughout his life, but certainly we see every time it's the time to celebrate a time of Sabbath, we see Jesus in worship. And so it was important to Jesus to come to be a part of the scriptures, the teaching of scriptures, to sing the songs, to pray the prayers, to be with the people of God. It was very important for him to do that. Now, I tell you this in part. One is because our culture does not believe that any longer. And so within the Christian church, we've moved from, on average, the average churchgoer goes 2 out of 4 weeks. It's now moving to about 1 in 3 weeks. So I realize I'm probably preaching to the choir here because you're the ones that are here, but no, the temptation is, and it's true, you want better preaching, there's podcasts of really good preachers. If you want better music, you can listen to the you can get your own stuff. But there is something about being in here. I felt it in those first minutes. Like, I was like, wow, awesome to be here with you. And I'm not here every Sunday with you, but so good to be here with you. There was something so good and so right. And so there's something about that pattern, that rhythm that we need to take advantage of. It's so good to this. But one of the things that you'll see too is that there's something about delighting in God in these things. So in the early church, they moved to this day. Sunday became this day where they would celebrate this because this was the day of the resurrection. And this was the day they began to come together for this purpose. And I think it's so important that as you see, part of this time together here is it's worship, it's delight, it's remembering. So part of remember what they're supposed to do in this is they're to remember God. They remember who he is and what he's done. One writer, she says this in her book. She says, we are 100% exertion and 0% reflection. And I don't know how your life looks like now, but do you have any space in it to reflect. I think of a lot of you young adults, and you're climbing the ladder of success, right? You're climbing. And I wonder, when do you stop to figure out if the ladder is even leaned up against the right building? When do you stop to think about that and think, why am I doing this? Why am I pursuing this? Again, getting to this and this sense of what's going on. So there's something about this that I think is super important for us, that when we come together in times like this, here's what I sense. In a time like this, God is for us. God is with us. God is able. These are things my heart needs. I was coming home one day. I used to own this little business, and I was coming home from meeting with the Anaheim Ducks. It was a little hockey business. And I met with the vice president, and he loved this little company we had. And he's like casting on this vision, Bill, we can have this with every NHL team. And I can still remember driving over the 57, getting on the 22, and thinking about leaving ministry and doing this thing full time. Because it was working, it was successful, and all these things. I thought, I'll just be the best youth leader the church has. That Sunday, I don't know how to explain it, because I was a youth pastor at the time. I was just sitting in the pews like everyone else, and something happened in worship that day. Something about being in the presence of God with everyone else, that instead of quitting my job, I decided, no, we need to sell the company. Now's the time to sell. And I look back in that moment, and I think the strangest place, because I never would have put those things together, that in a place of worship, that the decision would come to sell my company. There's something about resting, but worship and delight being a part of it. Listen to Isaiah say it this way. He says, look, if you keep your feet from breaking the Sabbath, from doing as you please on my holy day, if you call the Sabbath a delight and the Lord's holy day honorable, and if you honor it by not going your own way and not doing as you please or speaking idle words, notice what he says, then you will find your joy in the Lord. I will cause you to ride in triumph on the heights of the land and to feast on the inheritance of your father Jacob. I wish you would just go through that passage and circle all those words that are awesome. Words like joy, inheritance, feast. I mean, all those words in there, triumph. There's something about delighting in God, slowing yourself down enough to just be with God, delighting in Him, to see it. You and I need to learn to build into our life some sense of rhythm for this, of slowing down. And we see this in the life of Jesus, and we need to see it in our lives as well. This idea of Sabbath was never meant to be a burden to you. In fact, Jesus said it this way. He said, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for Sabbath. There's all kinds of, once you start trying to make rules for what you can and can't do, this is where it gets all freaky. Because like, for example, Jesus would heal on the Sabbath, and the people would go, you can't do that. That's work. Let's kill him. So you couldn't heal someone, but you could plot murder. So so once you get into this stuff, it gets really strange. So part of it, for me on a day like today, obviously this is a little bit of work. So part of my Sabbath is Friday, resting in this, but I want to be so set up so that when I come in here, when I have this time, when we have this time, like it's my heart is filled with joy. And then I go from here to going home, and I take the best nap. Like, I so love my Sunday nap. It is the best part of my week. And then a beautiful part of a great Sunday for me is dinner with a few friends, laughing, telling stories. Someone brings up work, you push it to the side, and you go back to stories and laughing, and more stories and laughing. That, to me, is a wonderful way to enjoy a day like this. So here's what I want to invite you to do. I'm going to invite the band to come up, and here's our invitation to you this week. So each week we've been giving you something to practice. And last week Mike talked a little bit about prayerfulness. So here's what I want you to do. And he talked about finding a place and a time. So I want to echo that a little bit and say this. Our spiritual discipline this week is silence and solitude. Silence and solitude. What we see is this, right? Jesus had a pattern of pulling away, finding a place to be alone and to be with God. And there was something very powerful by that. And I want to encourage you with that. Now, you may think, where in the world am I going to find that time? I don't know that this is going to be a recipe, but this is description, not prescription. Mark 1:35 says this, very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, went out to a solitary place where he prayed. You may have to get up before everyone, or you may have to get away from everyone. You may have to do something in your life to create that. But I want you to see there was a pattern that Jesus had. Regularly he had this. And then there was this weekly part of his week where he stopped from the stuff and it was about being with God and his people and enjoying that. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to give you a moment to practice this. All right? So you can't really have solitude, but you're going to have silence. And we're going to put some little prayer prompts up here on the screen. So before we sing these last songs, I just want you to just be guided by these prompts. Let them lead you into a practice of that being with God. Now, as you try to find that time, what I'd like you to try to do is just once this week, find a time to be alone with God, like a silence and solitude. Now, don't try to overachieve. Don't bring all your Beth Moore books with you or Bible studies and I'm going to catch up, whatever it is. You can bring a in fact, here's the rule. How about this? Just bring a Bible. That's it. Maybe a journal, but just be with God. Just be with God. And so let's bow together. Let's pray. As you just take a moment, just read these little moments here on the screen and let them lead you into a time of prayer.